If there's time, then there's time to turn things around. If there is a tomorrow, then there is hope today. The only have-to-bes in life are the ones we prop up and adhere to. And how interesting that oftentimes we don't even realize we're the ones holding them up. There's a simple question that I like to ask as the sun comes up and the coffee brews. Am I living today like it's an obligation or something more? Is it an automatic continuation of the past or a methodical move towards a future that lights me up? And these aren't small distinctions, right? I've lived both ways. I've felt what it's like to feel both. I remember going to work and joking around that a flat tire would be a real treat. That's not accountability. That's not control. That's essentially living life as a jellyfish floating along with the tide. And while the lack of required output, innovation, and planning may have felt like a win in the moment, or a burden lifted off my shoulders at the time, it deprived me of that which resides in the soul of every human being alive. Purpose. Personal agency. See, you can only go so far, so long being the spectator of your own journey. You can only go so long looking out the window before you wonder just what it'd be like to be behind the wheel. When we put our actions up against the question, why? It astounds me how many things are done because it's what we've always done. We act like we're expected to act, think like we're expected to think, see who we're expected to see, but expected by whom? Some of my greatest breakthroughs in life emerged after being asked why by people I look up to or respect. Why have you accepted that? That's your income? Okay, great, but why? That's how you spend your day? I see. How come? And when one is tasked with looking at their own life through a magnifying glass, some hidden truths always emerge. It shines a spotlight in the corner of the room, illuminating those shadows where one can, if they look hard enough, make out the wolf in sheep's clothing. That is the phrase, because that's how I've always done it. We get in life what we accept. We are what we allow ourselves to be, and if we don't ask ourselves which mountain is worth climbing, which ocean is worth crossing, we simply float with the tides. We're at the mercy of the winds. We forfeit the mastery over our own lives that awaits if we're willing to take that wheel and navigate. So here are a few things to take with you. First is you are bound by nothing. The parameters you exist between are of your making. You can get in that car and drive. You can walk away and begin something new. You can entertain that vision that's been conveniently tucked away in the back of your mind. Understand that to not go is fine, but it's a decision. And perhaps a decision you'll wish you made differently. And second, difficult today liberates you tomorrow. It's easier to observe. It's easier to say how you wish things were. After all, stepping out into the fast-paced, chaotic world is tough. It's scary, it's unpredictable, but it's where you find yourself and the path that's calling your name. It's beyond the pins and needles, emerging as one jumps into the cold water, that they're able to find that evolution. If there's time, then there's time to turn things around. If there is a tomorrow, then there is hope today. Today is not like any day I've lived before. And why should it be? This very second, there are roads to be explored that I've never before walked down. There are actions to take that I've never before taken, and ideas to bring to life that I've never before given the respect they deserve. That saying, my golden rule, you are always one decision away from a totally different life. You are always one realization from pulling the lever, opening the door, finding the answer you've been walking by all your life. The problem is you don't see today as today. You see it as a continuation of yesterday. The same movie with the same characters and same rules, without even realizing you need to change the script. Emerson said, write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. Why? Because it can be. Your job is to remember that things will continue on and on and on until we give them an end. We must manually close the book on yesterday's story and start anew because we can. We often don't realize, but we can. And that is why the morning, each new day is so precious. It's taking the mistakes and sometimes disappointments of yesterday and transforming them into today's lessons and the opportunity to begin again. A new journey seen through a new lens, walked through a new pair of shoes, a new sense of self. So here is your reminder that the words were and are, they're very different. That's why each sunrise transcribes into the sky the hopes and dreams of the you that you've always wanted to be. It's not a crazy formula or some secret code. It's simply untying your boat from the harbor that is yesterday and moving towards tomorrow's horizon. I was thinking this morning about a conversation I had with my grandfather. This particular example, I was living in LA at the time. My grandmother, my grandfather, they flew in from Boston, and I think we're doing some family stuff, but I wanted to hang out with my friends down the street, right? I wanted to go to Kyle's house, play Star Wars, whatever it was we were doing, and that felt like the world to me. Like, I didn't want to miss out on that because I felt like I'd lose it. If I wasn't there, I'd lose something. And I remember him taking me from the kitchen to the living room and being like, Eddie, you have to relax. He's like, that stuff, I promise you, will always be there. The fun, the escape, the metaphorical, going to Kyle's house will always be there. You have to do what's right for you. And then when you need that, it's there. It was almost like all the nuance and the detail is reacquirable. And why I'm bringing this up, and it's a little bit of a pivot, but I've seen throughout my life, right, personally, this sort of loss aversion, like I mentioned a few days ago, where you don't want to leave a bad situation because you fear that the very basic boxes that you've checked, you can't get them back, right? It's like you can have a job that's you're not satisfied, you're unfulfilled, there's nothing great about it, you've lost your sense of self, your purpose, but you're getting a paycheck, right? Or, at least you have some direction in the day or in your life. You can say who you are. There's some identity. There's some very basic boxes. You're not happy, but the basic boxes are checked. And what you fear is if you leave in pursuit of something different, maybe you can't check those boxes again, right? Or you're in a relationship and it's like, it's not right. And you know in your core it's not right. But there's very basic boxes that are checked, right? You're not alone, you're with someone, there's some predictability in your life. Like, it'd be tough to lose those things. And so that's really the essence of what I want to say, right? Having the self-belief and the self-trust, because that's really what it comes down to understanding that if you move into the unknown, you can recreate those things. You can check those basic boxes off. But if you don't have the courage to move out of that situation, you'll be shackled to a world that's not really meant for you, right? So like the job thing. And by the way, I always worry about saying this because there are people that love their jobs. I'm never ever knocking a 9-to-5. Like, it's just my thing. Right? That was, for me, I felt so constrained, and I'm just such a, like, I love to be creating and sort of out on the fringes. That's just like what motivates me. That's not how everyone works. So I don't want this to be interpreted as me bashing a 9-to-5. It's just my story. But like, I realize that I could have walked away, come back in a year after living in like Thailand, and things would have been exactly the same when I got back. Right? I could have got a similar job. I could have found ways to check off those same boxes, right? Those foundational things, they're reacquirable. Just like the relationship thing, right? It's like, if it's not right for you, there's 8 billion people in the world. 8 billion. You think one of those doesn't share your value system? One of those you can have fun with, hang out with, relax, enjoy yourself, improve your life? Like, of course you can. But you're worried about losing the very basics, the very basic boxes that you've checked. And it's like you have to have the courage and self-belief to walk away from those things. You have to believe in yourself enough to know that you can recreate a reality, right? With a similar foundation, but with the things on top of that that make you happy, make you feel alive. Like I'm prone to do, I found a random internet quote today. It says, "I am learning to love the sound of my feet walking away from things that are not meant for me." And it's that simple, right? You can never get where you're going if you're shackled to the things that don't move you, right? If you're staying in a place of discontent. And the message is simple, right? Believe in yourself, trust yourself. There's nothing in your life that you can't reacquire or rebuild. But what you'll miss if you stay in that place is the opportunity, the upside, the people that will change your life, the places that you've never seen, the experiences, the journeys that make life worth living. The upside is just too high. You're right where you need to be. Sure, you have your doubts. Perhaps you feel tired, alone, fearful. Maybe you're trying to make sense of a world that feels too complex, where all you see and hear are reasons to turn back, to find shelter, to run. Don't. Regardless of how hard it seems, don't. You are right where you need to be. Turning thoughts to things, making life from dreams what makes change so interesting, so powerful yet deceptive, is that it comes to us in small doses. Not a tidal wave of transformation, but a slow, steady, rising tide of progress. No one feels the tug of erosion, yet it chips away. And so do you. Removing piece by piece the old you, the world you're moving away from, and piece by piece, you unveil the promise of your becoming. You may not see the whole picture. You may not understand the whole story, but right now, in real time, it's being told. And you are right where you need to be. We just weren't equipped to understand what that looks like. It's never been what you see that makes you uneasy. It's what's missing. That's what hurts. The solutions you wanted, the changes you expected, the finish lines you envisioned. It's the wondering, how long must I wait? Did I make a wrong turn? Is the joke on me? But it's this line of questioning that causes so many to stop, unaware of how close they were, ignorant to the foundation they were standing on. What you need is not a miracle. It's to simply carry on, to keep laying those bricks, because not a one is wasted. And sometimes you don't realize you're on the 80th floor until you look down. That climb can be frustrating, exhausting. It isn't always glamorous, but it's necessary. And strength comes from understanding that truth. You are right where you need to be. The world, it can't take what you refuse to give it, and self-belief is non-negotiable. It's off the table, your most prized possession. So hold it tight, because it'll be needed when the journey feels long and the road impossible. You'll know that you can always take one step forward, and that is the essence of life, of growth, of progress. Think about the steps, the lessons, the self-discovery that led you to this intersection of now and forever. This beginning of whatever you decide comes next. You are right where you need to be because you are armed with the decisions that brought you to today and the courage to let them carry you into tomorrow. You could be anywhere, but you're here. And as you strap up and settle in, you'll see that right here is everything you need. So I want to start with a story about cliff jumping with my friends. Maybe 4 years ago now, we flew into Las Vegas, spent some time in Vegas, and then we hit like national parks in Utah and then Arizona, and went all the way up the coast. When we were in Lake Tahoe, at the very end, there was this spot to cliff jump. This really, really high peak. And, you know, it's notorious, and it was just like a scary thing. And I remember walking up, there were 3 of us, and 2 other people were there. It's like you have to hike up to it. It's kind of in the woods a little bit. One of my buddies walked up, and, you know, we thought he was going to jump right off. And he stood there and he looked down, and he looked down for, I don't know how long, a while. You know, ultimately jumped. As far as I knew, I wasn't afraid of stuff like that, right? So I walk out and I look over the edge, and I could not bring myself to jump. Physically, I couldn't do it. Rationally, I couldn't speak myself or talk myself into it. There was no more rationality going on. It was just, I was frozen in fear. And I just remember sitting there and looking down. And, people would come up and ask about it, and they'd be like, can I jump? And I'm like, go ahead, right? Like it almost got to the point where it was hurting my pride, and I still couldn't jump. And I just stood there, and I stood there, and I stood there. I forget how long it took. I don't really know, and time was probably felt insane in that moment, but eventually I did, and it was incredible, right? It was a forever long drop, and just the adrenaline and the excitement, and you realize for a second that type of thing, that's peak living, and there's more of that out there in the world, and all of a sudden you want to capture it and obtain it, and you realize what you had been missing, and then my friend came up after me. He stood there for just as long too, right? It's a very weird thing, and it's hard to explain. There are so many situations that are this peak in our life, this cliff that we know we need to jump from. We know the other side is better, or we suspect, but we can't bring ourselves to do it. And this all came from a quote I found from John Green, one of my favorite authors. In his book, Paper Towns, it says, "It is so hard to leave until you leave. And then it is the easiest goddamn thing in the world." And that's right on the money, right? Being on the edge of that cliff, it is terror, sheer terror. It is so hard to make that jump, and then you do, and it's like life opens up. And it's the same thing in this case, right? It's so hard to leave until you do. It's terrifying to uproot, to change, to go somewhere you don't know. But once you do, life opens up. It's incredible. The other side is beautiful, and it's waiting for you. All of this is coming to a single point, a rule that I use to guide my decision making. And the rule is simple. If you are not content where you are, that is your reason to jump. Because on that cliff, rationality dissolves. The future is unknown, and it's scary. And how are you going to logically talk yourself into a scary unknown when you're at that point? You can't. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's why so many of us are scared to make that jump. And we ultimately turn back and we concede and go, okay, I'll just stick with what I have. This isn't great, but it is what it is. I can't bring myself to make that jump. Right? We're all there at some point. I've been there. I've been there with speaking. Big cliff for me when I first started. Ultimately jumped and put me on a trajectory that changed my life, right? Same thing with making videos, same thing with my first client. Like all these things, they're terrifying. And in the moment, you can't logically speak through them, so you just have to go. And it's like, well, how do you logically explain? You don't, you just go. Because if the present, here's the rule, if the present is not making you content, go, jump, right? Never forget that the path, the future is comprised of 1 trillion paths, and you can bend them and shape them and remake them. And sometimes it won't work. Sometimes it'll, blow up in your face. But again, you're still presented with an opportunity to adjust and remake and bend and reapproach and continue forward, right? The only way to lose is to stay on that cliff for the rest of your life. And so if you needed some type of rationality, if you needed some type of reason, I'm hoping that maybe I can give that to you today. If you are not content where you are, jump. Because somewhere along the way, you'll figure it out. Every time I've jumped, it's changed my life for the better. Maybe not immediately, but ultimately. And as I say, that's what life's all about. So, hey, I hope you got something from this podcast. If you did, please subscribe, rate, review. Helps me get it out to the world. And guys, I appreciate that. And I will catch you tomorrow.